This is my sixth podcast compiled during the COVID-19 pandemic. Because we have just celebrated VE Day, I thought I would offer some World War II movies which might be a watch during the lockdown. In these modern times, World War II has fallen from favour as a subject for combat movies, and the ones which have been made in recent times have all been American, mostly featuring American activities in the continent of Europe after D-Day. This might imply that there have been no British films made about the conflict. Nothing could be further from the truth. In the aftermath of the war, many people wrote books about secret wartime activities, such as the air raids on German dams, the commando raids on German ports, and the activities behind German lines. Many of these were turned into black and white films in the 1950s, often using actual aircraft, ships, or military vehicles still available, and sometimes including related newsreel footage. Of course, such movies will be unlikely to create worldwide interest, now necessary for a film project to make money. In celebration of the 75th anniversary of VE Day, one of the aspects of the event has been to remember those who lost their lives in the war. And so one might look at the morality of making an entertainment out of what for some people was a disaster. But it is the narrative process to take a situation and use it to create tension, humour, or information, or even all three, and war provides an ideal environment. So in my view, it is up to us to accept and enjoy what is on offer. The first film is The Longest Day, released in 1962. On the 6th of June 1944, the Allied forces made a waterborne assault on the beaches of Normandy, as well as attacks by airborne groups who landed inland by parachute and glider, these in order to capture essential river crossings. There was concern as to whether the weather conditions would be suitable, and in France the German High Command had no idea of what was going to happen. The film shows the Allied command wondering what to do and the troops hankering to get on with the job. And there is an awareness that any delay might reveal the presence of the invasion force to the Germans. The German generals telephone each other, generally laughing at the possibility of attack. The airborne troops are seen parachuting into the countryside and in some cases towns and villages, many being shot by the Germans. The film featured events on Omaha Beach, which was the landing point for the Americans, and proved to be a difficult task, the film featuring the landing craft taking the troops to the shore and the fleet shelling German defences. The beaches of Corsica stood in for Normandy, and the US Navy put up a lot of ships in support of the film. As well as the beach scenes, several lesser battles and resistance activities feature, one of them allowing for the inclusion of a French actress. The cast was enormous, but the action centred on John Wayne, controversially as the leader of the American Parachute Infantry, and Robert Mitchum as Brigadier General Norman Cotter, who effectively led the activities on Omaha. The British contingent included Peter Lawford, by then a well-known Hollywood actor, and Richard Todd, who participated in the assault on Pegasus Bridge, both in the film and in real life. Richard Burton took a couple of days off from Cleopatra to take part as a walk-on. Sean Connery appeared in his last film before becoming James Bond. At 3 hours it is a very long film, but sufficiently diverting and containing enough actual fact to be worth sitting through. The next film is Kelly's Heroes, released in 1970. Private Kelly, played by Clint Eastwood, has history which we won't bother to go into. but in which, in the final months of the war, has allowed him to interview a German colonel and find that about 30 miles behind German lines, in a small town bank, there's a hoard of gold in bars. And he reasons that if he can get to the town, he can retrieve the gold and retire. Hence, we go through the process of getting the band together, resulting in a collection of well-known American actors, including Don Rickles and Telly Savalas, making up the team, as well as a hippie tank commander played by Donald Sutherland, who joins up with 3 Shermans, determining that they will meet Kelly and his guys at the town. They had adventures on the way, resulting in the loss of their vehicles in a friendly fire event and the deaths of 3 of the team in a minefield. And when they get to the town, they find 3 tigers in the square, giving them new problems. Although some of the critics found problems with the deaths of the guys in what was supposed to be a comedy, more or less, it is still good stuff, and the director, Brian Hutton, created a sequence much followed in later outings. The trio of Shermans come out of a railway tunnel into a German railway depot, and the camera views the action through the sights of the tank's 75mm guns. When they settle on a target, they fire, and we see the target disintegrate. There is also a wonderful sequence which allows the Sherman to disable a tiger, shooting it up the arse, while the German tank is prevented from traversing its turret due to obstacles. Amazingly, this film is based on real robbery, where Americans and Germans cooperated to steal a hoard of German bullion, an event which has been concealed from the public for many years. This film is 50 this year, but still good fun if you can accept the mortality. And now we come to one of the best known of the World War II films, Saving Private Ryan, directed by Steven Spielberg and released in 1998. It is difficult to believe that this movie is more than 20 years old. I watched it the other day and it is as fresh as ever. But that's not to say it is without faults. You could almost say that it is a combination of the first and second of these films on this list. Firstly, the landing at Omaha with Tom Hanks as Captain Miller, virtually reprising the role of Robert Mitchum in The Longest Day. And then the whole plot following that used in Kelly's Heroes, although the objective in this case is a man rather than a load of bullion. After the landing on the beach and making it to the top of the cliffs, Miller is given the task of going inland to get Private Ryan, whose brothers are being killed, and hence the general in charge has decided that Ryan, played by the then unknown Matt Damon, will be brought safely back home so that his mother's distress will be minimized. Miller's platoon are not keen on the job, feeling that it is inappropriate that they should be hazarded to save the life of one man. They have adventures on the way. One of them is a confirmed coward, there always has to be one, who comes good in the finale. When they finally find Ryan, he is helping to defend a bridge and won't leave, so Miller and his guys have to stay and defend the bridge as well. Once they accept they are to be part of the action, their sniper is sent up the church tower and becomes the central point of the defence. Where did we see that before? Oh yes, in Kelly's Heroes. The film might be best remembered for its harrowing 20 minutes or so when we are on Omaha Beach with the invaders, as they are shot, blown up and dismembered by the Germans, dying, losing limbs and bleeding into the sand. This is another extremely long film, nearly 3 hours, but now it is a download, you can watch it in stages. A film which seems to have been forgotten amongst the movies featuring combat is Fury, released in 2014. Fury is a tank whose crew have campaigned in it in North Africa and now are part of an armoured group making their way into Nazi Germany in 1945. Fury is commanded by Sergeant Don War Daddy Collier, played by Brad Pitt. Their camaraderie is shattered when one of the crew is killed and he is replaced by Norman Ellison, a former clerk who is generally dissed due to his inexperience, which later hazards the tank. Events involve Norman, who fails to kill some German boy soldiers, resulting in the loss of one of the tanks. Later, he is forced to shoot a prisoner as punishment. And when the platoon capture a small German town, he and Don get together with a couple of German women, Norman having sex with the younger one. The desperation of war, so it is said. But as they leave, a German artillery shell demolishes the house, killing the women, and makes Norman feel even worse. Later, their tank group has a battle with a single Tiger, which dispatches all of them except for Fury, which, by clever manoeuvring, is able to get behind the Tiger and shoot it up the arse. Where did we see that before? Oh yes. There is more, and the climax is suitably distressing. This film used one of the one Tiger which was still in existence, fully restored by the personnel in the Bovington Tank Museum. And a Sherman from their collection was also dressed up as Fury. The availability of the hardware resulted in the film being made in England. This probably not be a movie for everybody. The first act is extremely distressing, and that's not the end of it. But the tanks are great, so if track vehicles light your fire, it is essential viewing. Lastly, we come to Dunkirk from 2017. Dunkirk was written and directed by Christopher Nolan and deals with the real events which took place in the summer of 1940 when the British Expeditionary Force had been forced back by superior military might onto the beaches of Dunkirk. In order to rescue them, a fleet of small craft started out from the south of England and, despite the dangers, sailed up to the beach and took on board as many British soldiers as they could carry without sinking. The small ships managed to rescue more than 300,000 of them. The action is seen from the point of view of a soldier on the beach, which involves a subplot as he and others try to get away, from the deck of a small boat piloted by a character played by Mark Rylance, and from the cockpit of a Spitfire piloted by Tom Hardy. There is drama as Spitfires are shot down, and finally the last one manages to shoot down a German dive bomber which has been causing chaos on the beach before his fuel runs out. The Beachmaster, played by Kenneth Branagh, attempts to control marine events. This is terrific stuff, whether you understand the different time frames or not. It is extremely loud. Veterans at the premiere said it was louder than the real thing, and visually stunning. A real cinematic event. I was a bit thrown by the varying sea conditions, but I am a former mariner. It would still be a good idea to see it in the cinema if you could, since it was filmed in IMAX. But failing that, a decent-sized flat-screen TV will probably do the trick. So that's it for this week. For us in Spain, for the second week running, the lockdown has eased a bit. People are allowed to go out jogging at some times of day, and there are designated opportunities for children and the aged to be able to go out for walks. Though things seem to be getting a bit better here. I'm not quite sure whether I believe the statistics, particularly since different websites present different numbers. There is the possibility that at some time in the near future we may be able to visit other people in our municipality. But we should be cautious. Anyway, sample these stunning World War II films. I and many others were born during the war, so it can't have been all bad.